The Boston Celtics have a lot of decisions to make this summer. They're going to be one of the more interesting teams to look at in this year's offseason. And they've already gotten busy this summer, trading away Kemba Walker, acquiring Al Horford and Moses Brown, adding to the quality centers they have on this team. Someone potentially for the future in Moses Brown, and someone for the present for some veteran leadership in Al Horford. But they still have a lot more decisions to make. And we're going to be talking about some of those decisions within this video and how they can potentially improve off of what was a lackluster and poor season for what they would have hoped last year, ultimately finishing as the 7th seed and going out quite easily to Brooklyn. With that being said, if you guys do go on and enjoy the video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you do enjoy, and let's just get right into it. And so, obviously, this core of this team is going to continue to be Jayson, Tatum, Jaylen Brown. It has been, and it will continue to be. They both had very good seasons last year. Tatum did have some moments of struggle, but of course, a large portion of that was due to him just struggling with the virus of fitness and missing significant time because of that. And so that's fair enough. You can't really give him too much slack for that. Jaylen Brown had a breakout season, definitely the best season of his career, and he's proven to be every bit worth the money that he is currently getting. Some thought that was going to be an overpay, giving him the money that they did when he signed that extension. And that deal looks absolutely gorgeous right now, relative to what some other guys across the league are making at his production. He's been playing absolutely phenomenal on both ends. But outside of that core, there's questions. At least I have questions about this team, and I think anyone should after how they played last year. Depth continues to be a question mark. It's very young, and it could continue to develop and improve to a point where it could be positive, but there's definitely some question marks that need to be answered moving forward as far as their depth. And also now, of course, Kemba Walker has been traded. And now, granted, I think Kemba Walker should have been traded. I think it was a wise trade. I think they improved their center spot, which is positive. I think Al Horford can still be a decent center for them. It gives some good leadership and mentorship for Moses Brown, for Robert Williams, as those two will compete to be the future of the center for the Boston Celtics. Tristan Thompson needs to go, though. He shouldn't be in the equation. He's the 4th center. He's the worst center. He's overpaid. It is what it is. That was just a bad sign. But they need to figure out what they're doing at point guard, because they have one of 3 options right now. They could start Marcus Smart at point guard, who's not your traditional point guard. Not a great playmaker, not a great shot creator. Much more just a defensive guy, can hit some corner threes for you, but really isn't an on-ball type of guy ideally, especially as your primary playmaker or anything like that. He's not going to create much off the dribble for you. He's just not that guy. But they could start him at point guard. Other option is Tatum, Brown, slash the Smarts on the court, kind of platoon the on-ball point guard duties, playmaking on-ball duties per se. That's an option. Now, Tatum and Brown already have a lot of on-ball playmaking type time and role anyways last season. It's not like Kemba Walker was the only guy who would ever bring the ball to the court, be the guy, be the playmaker. But nonetheless, you still need that guy. And this Boston team, I think, especially last year, we noticed really missed that playmaking point guard. It was very stagnant on offense at times, very isolation heavy. There wasn't that much ball or player movement. And a big part of that was because their 3 core guys are isolation heavy guys, Tatum, Brown, and Kemba. And I think having a playmaking point guard for this team is going to be very important. And that's what they need to focus on doing this summer, which is, I think, what option number 3 is, and what I would recommend if they can do it, is being able to add a point guard via free agency or a trade that can give them a good playmaking point guard. Now, that's going to be hard to do because cap space is limited for this team. Jayson Tatum's making 28, Al Horford's making 27, Jaylen Brown's making a hair under 27, Marcus Smart's sitting at 14.5, Tristan Thompson's almost making 10 million. That contract needs to go. And so they don't have much cap space to deal with. They have to sign someone for 15 to 20 million, and that's not even considering if they bring back Evan Fournier, which they very well might do. And so they may have to rely on Marcus Smart and or Peyton Pritchard this season, or they could work a sign and trade for someone with Marcus Smart. Some potential options for that: Lonzo Ball. You could also see someone like Goran Dragic be involved in a sign and trade, or someone like Mike Conley, although I think that's less likely. There's also been some discussion with Colin Sexton rumors, but I don't think that's a good fit for this team. This team does not need another ISO-heavy, ball-dominant scoring guard. They need a playmaking point guard. They don't need a point guard. They need a playmaking point guard. They're better off playing without a true traditional point guard, or Peyton Pritchard being the true traditional point guard, as inexperienced and still is, of course, good, but probably needed some more development before you want to throw him in that role. They don't need another ball-dominant guard. You're better off adding a better quality player somewhere else, adding depth, than trying to acquire another ball-dominant guard. It's just not what this team needs. They need some playmaking around their two stars in Tatum and Brown. But so the next biggest thing outside of a point guard this summer from Boston is depth. Depth has always been an issue for this team come playoff time. It's tough. They don't quite feel the need. Jabari Parker was playing significant minutes for them in certain playoff games last year and down the stretch. I mean, Jabari Parker wasn't in the league for however many months, and there's a reason for that. I mean, on offense, he can still give you a little bit, but athletically, he's just not where he used to be after all of his injuries. Defensively, he's always been abysmal, and that was still very evident. And so it's tough. Like, Peyton Pritchard was good for them. He gave them some good depth. But outside of that, they were in a tough spot for depth. Romeo Langford was hit and miss. Naismith came on a bit more towards the end of the season and hit some big shots for them. Is a decent perimeter shooter. I like their center depth now. They finally have some depth at the center position. They have Moses Brown, Robert Williams, and Al Horford. As I said, Tristan Thompson needs to go. I don't know if they will trade him or buy him out, but they need to. It just needs to happen. Him getting $10 million is just really handicapping them right now from a salary cap standpoint. He needs to go, and they don't need four centers, and there's no point in playing Thompson over Moses Brown or Robert Williams when Robert Williams is definitely better than him already, and you could argue Moses Brown is as well. But they need some internal improvement from their young players to have depth outside of the center position. Because, as we said, the point guard position is a bit murky, but hopefully Peyton Pritchard can continue to improve, and so that he can become a very valuable bench piece for them this year and potentially become their sixth man, especially if Evan Fournier doesn't get re-signed, although he might be a starter for them anyways, depending on the guard situation. Same thing, Marcus Smart. We don't know whether he'll be a starter yet or not. That's hard to evaluate. I'll be discussing that more later on in a preview video for them closer to the season. But Romeo Langford needs to improve this season. Hopefully he can stay healthy. That's been the biggest problem for him early on in his NBA career. Hopefully he can stay healthy, continue to improve on the defensive end, show some flashes on offense, and be a decent two-way guard for them off at the bench. Hopefully Naismith can continue to improve as he enters his second year in the league, continue to be a decent perimeter shooter and offer some good spacing and shooting and a bit of scoring off of the bench. Grant Williams, he's an okay player, sure. Hopefully he can continue to give them something, a bit of good defense on the defensive end, but he doesn't really offer much on offense, and that's always been the knock on him. And so he ends up not getting a ton of playing time in the postseason, but still gets some because of his defense. But after that, there just isn't really that much to talk about here. Carson Edwards, again, you could say would be in there. Could try and improve and get some depth minutes out of him. Tremont Waters is a free agent, but they could bring him back. He showed some signs late in the season that could be some potential that they might want to bring him back. But they need a couple of these players to really step up and improve over the summer to have depth outside of their center position. And so here's what they have this summer for off seasons. Tristan Thompson needs to go. Okay, I think that's just my general consensus on that. He needs to go, and I would suggest that Marcus Smart sign and trade is the best option. But here are their two options, in my opinion, at least. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below of what their options are and what they should do. If they are to acquire a point guard, who you think they should acquire. But here's my thoughts. Option number one. They run it back. They re-sign Evan Fournier. They keep Marcus Smart. And then they either start Peyton Pritchard as a starting point guard, or they start Marcus Smart and they have Tatum, Brown, and Smart just kind of be three on-ball guys that all do the on-ball duties. And they're probably lacking a bit of a playmaker, but that's just the way it goes. Second option, Tristan Thompson still goes. They trade Marcus Smart, whether that's in a sign and trade, or they trade him and don't really retain much salary back. They wouldn't be able to trade him and bring in much salary, otherwise this just doesn't work if it's not a sign and trade. They let Fournier leave in free agency. They'd need the cap space, and then they try and sign a point guard with the remaining cap space that they would have, which I believe would be around 15 to 20 million, if that. Because, of course, they still would have a Horford, Jaylen Brown, and Jayson Tatum eating up a bit over 60% of their cap space, and then about another 10% on the rest of the team. So they could go out and sign one of the top point guards in the free agency market. They could go for a Goran Dragic, a Mike Conley, a Kyle Lowry, although I don't think he goes to Boston. But I'm just saying they have the money to go after one of those guys, and that's what they would need to do. They need a playmaking point guard. There aren't a ton that exists this summer. A lot of the guys are ball dominant. If you look at the guys like Dennis Schroeder, I wouldn't really call him a playmaking one. You're looking at Kyle Lowry, who's not really going to be interested in going to Boston, at least as far as I'm considered. some of the other guys in the market, such as Spencer Dinwiddie. He can play make a bit more for you. He is quite ball dominant, but he can be a decent playmaker and can fit that role a bit more. And so maybe that's someone they're a bit more interested in, but they're going to have to give him some significant money. That's kind of the options that Boston need to look at this summer. And ultimately, if Boston don't acquire a playmaking point guard, I think it's going to be another rough season for them. But the biggest thing for me outside of that is their defensive mentality just needs to improve. Of course, Brad Stevens is no longer the head coach. He's now in the front office. It's maybe a bit of a culture shift and philosophy change within this team. And I think you need to see more ball movement, more player movement, and more increased intensity and care on the defensive end. A few years ago, this was one of the top 5 defensive teams in the league. And they just aren't that anymore. Sure, they lost Al Horford this past season, but he's now back. Of course, not as good as he was a couple of years ago, but he is back. Jaylen Brown's still there. Jayson Tatum's still there. Marcus Smart is still there. You still have some decent defensive guys off the bench. There's no reason why this team can't be, at the bare minimum, a top 10 defensive team in the league, as far as I'm considered. I think they definitely have the capabilities and personnel to do that. And so that needs to return this season compared to some stints last year where they were just poor on the defensive end, and that's unexcusable for a team of this caliber on the defensive end. Defensive improvements, internal improvements for depth. You need a playmaking point guard. They need to make some smart decisions this summer to improve off of what was an abysmal season for them last year. Otherwise, they might get stuck in the middle of the pack or towards the bottom of the pack in the Eastern Conference playoff scene again this upcoming season, with a more normal season this upcoming year, most likely. Probably not going to see Miami struggle as much. Especially not going to see Toronto struggle as much with as much injury and protocol stuff they struggled with last year. You're going to see some teams and young teams improve in the bottom of the Eastern Conference. I think it's going to be a very competitive Eastern Conference this year. Atlanta have asserted themselves even more. The Knicks are likely to be even better. It's going to be tough out East, and Boston needs to meet the level of talent, meet the pack, and make the right decisions this offseason to stay competitive out East. But let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below on what Boston should do this offseason and how you think they will do in the Eastern Conference next year. That is my thoughts on the Boston Celtics. I will be sure to do a season preview on them and every other NBA team as the season gets closer. But yeah, that is my thoughts on Boston. If you guys want more and other what's next and off-season preview videos for other NBA teams across the league, be sure to check out my 2021 NBA What's Next playlist, as I've been doing off-season previews for every team. I've done all of the teams that did not make the playoffs this past season, and now, as we start with Boston, we are getting into the rest. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next one.